Welcome, everybody. Developing tonight, a firestorm of fallout from what one newspaper is calling the handshake that rocked the world. Welcome to the Kelly File, everyone. I'm Megan Kelly, still suffering a little bit with this cold. Believe it or not, we now have Trace Gallagher on standby, just in case the coughing begins. No one wants to hear that. It happened earlier today at the big memorial for Nelson Mandela. President Obama finding himself face to face with the president of Cuba, reaching out and shaking hands with none other than Raul Castro. He's the son of Fidel Castro, part of the family dictatorship running Cuba since 1959, with a regime specializing in repressing political dissent and taking political prisoners. In just 1 month last year, Cuba jailed more than 1,100 political dissidents. And this handshake took place at a tribute to a global symbol of freedom. In the hour since, the story has exploded. USA Today calling it the handshake that rocked the world. The New York Times asking if this will lead to another new headache for President Obama. The Politico website pointing out that the White House statement that the handshake was not planned, see that there? While the New York Daily News says it was still much more than just a gesture. And Senator John McCain goes so far as to compare it to Neville Chamberlain shaking hands with Hitler. During a Foreign Affairs hearing with the Secretary of State Kerry today, Congresswoman Ileana RosLehtinen said this.
Sometimes a handshake is just a handshake, but when the leader of the free world shakes the bloody hand of a ruthless dictator like Raul Castro, it becomes a propaganda coup for the tyrant. Raul Castro uses that hand to sign the orders to repress and jail democracy advocates.
Just to correct ourselves, Raul was Fidel's brother, not his son. With me now is Florida Congresswoman Ileana RosLehtinen. She's Chairman Emeritus of the House Foreign Affairs Committee and a Cuban American. Congresswoman, good to see you now. So I know you're upset about this. For the people who don't follow our relations with Cuba as closely as you do, why is this a big deal?
Well, I was born in Cuba, and like many others in my congressional district, I had to flee the communist tyranny when I was a young girl raised here in this wonderful country that we call home now. But my district is filled with Cuban Americans like me who have felt the sting of communist oppression. This is a man, Fidel and Raul, it makes little difference with whom we're referring, jails dissidents. And Megan, it's so incredible that today is the International Human Rights Day. And yet what happened in Raul Castro's Cuba, the man whose hand President Obama shook, he jailed, he detained, and he beat human rights activists who were trying to commemorate International Human Rights Day. That's why it matters. People are dying to come to the United States from my native homeland of Cuba to flee that communist oppression. Raul Castro does not deserve for a President Obama to bestow him this courtesy. He should have shunned him. He should have ignored him. Sometimes it happens that I can understand a setting, but in that nature, he really should have ignored Raul Castro and shook the hands of democratically elected leaders.
But
Raul
wait, let me
Castro
ask you.
is not a real leader of
Let
Cuba.
me ask you, because the White House is now saying that this was not planned, and yet political experts from both sides of the aisle, Democratic and Republican, have been saying, not sure if that's true, because these events are generally very carefully choreographed, and the White House would know who the president was going to see, what the route would be, and what the chances were of somebody like this sticking out his hand and asking for a handshake from the president of the United States. Your thoughts on it?
I think so. I think that the president did know. I think that his security details for sure knew who was going to be sitting around him. I don't think it was by chance or by accident that the president of the United States was seated in front of Raul Castro. I'm not saying he was in charge of the seating, but he knew who was going to be behind him. He could have easily turned the other way and ignored him. And it just happened, but whatever. What matters most is the policy.
What do you think the president, if it was intentional, what was the president trying to say?
Well, I hope that it doesn't signal a shift in policy, and that's why I wanted to force Secretary Kerry to admit that Raul Castro is a dictator and that this does not mean any change in policy, because we saw a shift with the Syria policy, we saw a shift with the Iran policy. Now we're trusting Iran to dismantle its nuclear program. It's unbelievable, and I think that the president wants to make good on that Nobel Peace Prize that he didn't deserve, still doesn't now, but that he got it even before he was really president. And now in this second term, I fear the worst in this presidency when it comes to foreign policy. He's tiptoeing around all the thugs and making deals whenever he can. So it worries me. We should be advocating for freedom, for democracy, and standing up for American values, not shaking Raul Castro's hand.
Ileana RosLehtinen, thank you so much for being here.
Feel better. You did great on Leno.
Oh, thank you, ma'am. Thanks so much. I was able to keep the coughing under control, and yet today, not so much. Just adding a little drama to the show for you tonight. Well, it wasn't just the handshake getting attention at the Mandela Memorial today. News photographers also captured this moment. Look at this shot. President Obama posing for a three-way selfie with two other world leaders. Our power panel weighs in on this photo op, which is causing a lot of controversy. Just ahead. And breaking tonight, dramatic new signs of trouble for Democrats from the White House on down. President Obama's approval rating dropping to its lowest ever in the Quinnipiac University national polling. Look at this, 38%. 38 now say they approve of the job he's doing. 57% disapprove. That is nearly a complete reversal of the numbers President Obama enjoyed back in 2009. And it gets worse here for Democrats. If the election were held today, voters say they would rather see Republicans in charge of both the Senate and the House. Now 47 to 42%. Look at that, a 5-point margin. And the spread is even larger when you talk to independents. 50% say they would rather see Republicans in charge of Congress. 35% say they would go with the Democrats. How about that? Wow. Chris Steigerwalt is our Fox News digital politics editor and host of Power Play on FoxNews.com Live. Chris, so the thing that's so striking about that is we've talked many times about how on that generic ballot, the Republicans have been disadvantaged for many months. And now what a reversal to see. In the overall, they have an advantage, and with those critical independents, they have a significant advantage. What do you make of it?
Well, shoot, the Republicans are disadvantaged in the generic ballot historically, for decades, for generations. This is a majority Democrat country. When people become ready, and remember, this is just registered voters. This isn't likely voters. It's way too soon to be talking about likely voters. But among all registered voters, you find a general preference for Republicans. If you get there in a majority Democrat country, what you find out is that there is a serious systemic problem with the standing political order, and you start to see the contours of a wave election shaping up for 2016. That's why you have 2014. That's why you have Republicans like Ed Gillespie down in Virginia, former RNC chairman, saying, maybe I will run against Mark Warner in what was thought to be a safe seat. That's when you start to get top-tier recruits. That's when the money starts to come in, and that's when people start thinking bigger.
You know, this Quinnipiac poll, this is the president of the polling institute there, said that the results, in his words, are a rousing chorus of bah humbug for President Obama as American voters head into the holidays with little charitable to say about this president. Now, the polling was done between December 3rd and 9th. That is after healthcare.gov has been improved, after the president's, sort of mea culpa when he came out and tried to take some responsibility for the rollout of healthcare.gov. And still, the polling is not good for him on Obamacare, and it is not good for him on trustworthiness, Chris. Once again, a majority of those polled do not think the president is trustworthy or honest. That narrative seems to be sticking.
Well, it's one thing if you believe that Barack Obama is bad at being president. That's something that may change. Well, he's doing a little better, he's doing a little worse, it's up, it's down. If you think he is not honest, if you think you cannot trust him, and in this poll, more than 4 out of 10 of the folks said, only 4 out of 10 of the folks thought that he was trustworthy. Among independents, 60% said that the president wasn't trustworthy. This indicates something that you don't fix just because you say, hey, we fixed the broken website. It's getting a little better. Fewer people are going to lose their insurance than we expected. Those sorts of incremental, medium-scale changes to bad governance, ineffective governance, is one thing. But if people don't trust you anymore, and remember, this comes on the heel of the NSA, the IRS, Benghazi, all the other stuff, all those other breaches. If people don't trust you, they're not going to listen to you.
The problem for the president is he always had the trust, and people liked him, of the American people. I'm trying to say people liked him. So they may have disagreed with him on policy, but they liked him. And these polls suggest they're liking him a little less, which gives you a little less cash in the bank when you're trying to persuade people. Chris, great to see you.
You bet.